And hi, everyone. Welcome to 15 Minutes. I'm Andrew Huff. My guest today is the Chief Criminal Presiding Judge of King County Superior Court, Judge Jim Rogers. Judge Rogers, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You grew up in the area, went to high school locally. Tell me what you did when you were in your younger days.
So I grew up in a large, extended Irish Catholic family. We grew up on Capitol Hill and then moved to the east side. I went to Seattle Prep. I had a variety of jobs, played sports in high school. I rode crew at Green Lake. I was a truck driver on a wheat ranch for a while. Then I went to the University of Washington. I rode there for a year and graduated after 5 years during the beginning of the dawn.
The 5-year plan?
Exactly right.
1982, I think, is when you graduated.
That's right.
Great year for the Washington Husky football team.
Exactly.
The Rose Bowl victory.
Beginning of the Don James era.
That's right. Now, when you graduated from University of Washington, you then went into the Peace Corps for a couple of years to Sierra Leone.
That's right.
Tell me about that experience.
Sure. Well, when I grew up, I really wanted to get out of Dodge, as a lot of kids do. So I applied to the Peace Corps. I went to the agriculture program in Sierra Leone, where I worked in swamp rice production. As I used to joke, teaching farmers to do what they've been doing for hundreds of years before I got there. But it was a great experience, great people in Sierra Leone. I lived in a village by myself for about 2.5 years, about 27 months, I guess, where I was working in swamp rice production, still keep in close contact with a lot of Peace Corps volunteers from that era. And then after that, I went to law school. I went to Georgetown, graduated in 1988 from Georgetown Law School.
Let me ask you quickly about your time in Sierra Leone. Why did you choose to serve in that country?
You know, when I was growing up, it was really impressed upon me through my parents and through our Catholic faith, the importance of service. And so I was looking for some form of service to do after college, before I started working or going to law school. I wasn't really sure at that time what I was going to do. And so looking at all the options, I wanted a non-religious form of service, and Peace Corps seemed like a great option. I was very much a fan of Kennedy and Humphrey and their calls for service, even though they're obviously a little different generation than me. So that was why I went to the Peace Corps. Sierra Leone, frankly, I had a preference of 3 choices for countries, and I just put Africa, 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 because it seemed like an exotic place to go. I was interested in living there and seeing what it was like, and they picked Sierra Leone for me.
Country in West Africa, it's went through a very, very difficult period of about 10 years, a civil war in the 90s.
That's correct. You know, there's a famous movie, Blood Diamond, with Leonardo DiCaprio.
That's right.
Was after I was there. The Liberian Civil War was starting to spill over to Sierra Leone just about the time I left.
I see.
And Sierra Leone's made it through that now and is rebuilding.
How would you describe the people that live there? How would you describe their resiliency in dealing with those conditions?
Well, I think they're very resilient. There's a famous story, this happened after I was there, but where people were trying to vote. They had an election every 5 years there, and some of the people who were trying to stop the vote started setting off bombs in the area, not to kill anyone, but to rattle the voters, and they started chanting, "We will vote, we will vote." I mean, they're very resilient, very tough people. And besides that, I think I have to say they were like people all around the world. I mean, I found farmers that were diligent and hardworking, some not so much. I worked obviously with more progressive farmers. It was a great experience for me.
To see people who really don't have a whole lot, how hard they work, take care of themselves and their families, how did that experience change you as to a person that you are today?
I think for a judge to do his or her job effectively, you need to have a wide variety of life experiences, because you see a wide variety of people. So I think all of that helps, and I carried on through my professional life, gaining a wide variety of experiences as well. And of course, we all have our personal experiences in our own lives, but I think it's really important when you see someone before you and they're talking, because one of the essential jobs, in fact, I would say one of the most essential parts of being a judge, is the ability to listen to people, because your right to be heard is what is most important. That is an essential part of fairness.
You decided to go to law school after your service in the Peace Corps. You chose Georgetown Law School. Why did you decide to go to law school?
I thought about going to law school because probably I watched too much Perry Mason and read too many Sherlock Holmes stories. So I was always interested in crime, and crime has always been a passionate interest of mine, and obviously remains so as the chief criminal judge. That's really why I was interested in being a trial lawyer.
One of the reasons I went to law school too, I will admit, was what I saw on television
Yes.
and people that I wanted to be like. Your time in Washington, D.C. at Georgetown Law School, what kind of experience was that for you to be in our nation's capital?
It was a great experience. I often went to see Congress in session. I thought about politics for a brief second, but really I was more interested in becoming a trial lawyer, and I had great fellow students at Georgetown.
You were the clerk for federal judge Robert Bryan. I
Yes.
would imagine he was a great influence in your life.
He was a huge influence on my life. Judge Bryan views the law very much in a workmanlike way. And
What does that mean?
Well, he views it very much from a common sense perspective. He works through his orders very diligently in his writing, his thinking. He is a great, great federal judge, and he had a huge influence, and that was the first time I ever thought about whether that would be something I would want to do.
You went to work as a prosecuting attorney for about 10 years or so.
Well, first I was at a civil firm, Riddell Williams, Bulletin, Walk & Shaw, where I still maintain a number of close ties. And then I left there after about 4.5 years. I was in civil commercial practice. And then I was in the prosecutor's office over 10 years, where I spent most of my time prosecuting sex crimes and child abuse, and about 3 years in the homicide unit, which there is called the Most Dangerous Offenders Project, MDOP.
You obviously dealt with some very, very difficult subject matter, very difficult cases. I'm sure you saw some horrendous things during your career as a prosecuting attorney. How were you able to sort of separate that, leave the job, and go home at night? Or is that is that subject matter always with you to some degree, even when you leave the job at night? How are you able to do that?
Well, I think that in some ways it affects me less maybe than it affects some people. I view it as a form of service, I suppose, working in those kinds of cases. I found the cases fascinating. They're very, very difficult, and I mean that both in a personal term, but also in proving them. And so professionally, I also found them fascinating. I just was very interested. I was constantly thinking about my case theories and how I would, they were just being disproved or proved. And I think I got a reputation as being a very reasonable prosecutor. If the case had to be dealt with in another way, I would do that. But I would take hard cases to trial. And I also had some great mentors in the prosecutor's office there, a lot of whom are still there. And,
Who are some of those mentors?
Well, Scott O'Toole was a
sure.
mentor, I think. Don Raz, who taught us all about the importance of prosecutors giving discovery from the very beginning.
Longtime prosecutor.
Yeah, it's many people there that I thought. And Norm Mailing was actually a huge influence in my life. I approached him when I decided to run for judge, and we became friends. And he's, I think, one of the great leaders in King County history.
And why did you decide that you wanted to go ahead and go into elective office specifically to run for judge? I think in 2005 is when you were elected to office.
That's right. I began my term in 2005, ran in 2004. I had thought about it for a long time, and at that time there really weren't very many appointments being made, and the elective process has always fascinated me. So I had a close group of friends, none of whom are lawyers, and we all worked together.
That probably helps.
Yeah, it did. And I have a large extended family, as I've already told you, and my family was very intricately involved as well.
Let's talk about a couple of issues. First of all, what we're seeing now is more and more video evidence through the use of body cams, car dash cam
Yes.
videos. The technology is developing, but we're seeing municipalities are seeing more and more funding available so they can purchase this equipment, which is not cheap. Obviously, it has the equipment, the storage, providing it as evidence. How do you think that has changed the criminal landscape in terms of gathering evidence and prosecuting cases?
Well, I think it's changed it in a number of different ways. First of all, the body cam idea is not cheap not just because of the cameras, but the storing all the digital evidence. And I found through Public Records Act cases that sometimes the municipalities don't understand how their own computer systems work. So when a query comes in to get the evidence, they find it difficult sometimes to pull it if it comes from a way other than the criminal case itself. So there's been struggles with that, and I think those will all be worked out eventually. I think from the police perspective, the body cams in some ways make their jobs easier, they feel, but I think from the public perspective, it gives the ability to also monitor what the police are doing. There's obviously been a lot of cases recently involving violence that have been captured on video, a lot by the police, some by people who were at the scene. So that's obviously had a huge impact on a variety of cases, sometimes involving violence where the police have killed somebody in the course of their work. But generally, the police are telling us that they like the body cams because they find it easier to prosecute their cases.
Right.
Well, they're not the prosecutor, but they find it easier to press charges.
Do you find that officers maybe have more of a tendency that if they maybe blurred the lines, that they are now staying within the lines of what they are required to do because they know they are being videotaped?
Well, intuitively, that makes sense. I frankly haven't seen enough of them to really know the answer to your question. But I think that's what everyone expects will be the case. And a bad behavior will be on video. It's usually posted on YouTube. So I do think that that's an expectation that everybody has. Overall, I think the word we're both talking about is transparency. It increases the transparency of the interaction between the police officer and a suspect in a particular case. And I think everyone agrees that's positive.
And you were actually involved in a case where a local news agency, I think, sued the Seattle Police Department because they were not giving out some video evidence that this news agency wanted. And you presided over that, and you fined the Seattle Police Department because they weren't disclosing this video, but with some caveat saying that they do have a right to keep this evidence for a certain amount of time.
Well, that was the case, that was one of the cases where I learned that the Seattle Police did not understand how their own computer system entirely worked. In that case, there was I think it was King, was suing. They were seeking evidence through very simple queries. Can I have all of the evidence for X police officers or X dates? And the Seattle Police were saying, well, we can't give you that. We can't query our system in that way. And then I believe it was a Microsoft or another employee of a software corporation was stopped. And he asked for it in a way that a computer geek would understand it. And he got his immediately. And so I find them from that period of time when that person made the query that should have alerted the Seattle Police that they need to figure out how better to query their computer system in order to be transparent with the public.
Interesting. Let me ask you an organization that you've been involved in that I think is just a wonderful organization. It's the Freedom Education Project, Puget Sound. This is a program that provides educational resources to women who are serving time in correctional facilities so they can actually obtain a degree.
A college degree, that's right. It's college education, that's right.
To me, that just seems like a wonderful place where we should be putting money because that is going to benefit us in the long term.
Yes, and all the credit to this, frankly, rests in the hands of the educators that started this project. It's a fantastic project. It's one of those things where you hear about it, you say, well, this is obvious. This is what we should be doing. We need to give these people a head start so that when they get out of custody, it's already a huge adjustment. It's difficult to get a job. We all know that the stigma of being or having been convicted makes it difficult to get a job. So why not provide them the education to show the motivation while they've been incarcerated, to provide them the skills that they can do to get out and get a job. So it's a fantastic organization.
We only have a minute or so left, but let me ask you about the courthouse, the building in which you work. It is in a state of, some would say, disrepair. It's a 100-year-old building. There have been some patchwork over the years, but really I think we've reached a point where some significant changes, repairs need to be made to the courthouse. Is that something that you're concerned about, that we simply need to make these updates, not from a structural point of view, but for instance, I know that some of you and your colleagues are advocating a holding area outside of the courtroom where inmates can be brought, because right now inmates are brought in from the jail using the same hallways that judges and attorneys use. Where are we at in terms of seeing these changes with the courthouse?
Well, the King County Council just received a report, as you know, talking about the cost it would be to upgrade the building, just in the most basic sense. We're talking about pipes, electricity, heating and ventilation, air conditioning, those very basic things. And the cost was staggering, leading certain council members to ask, why don't we just build a new building that could be the same cost or maybe less expensive and get some of the other things that we need. It is true in the King County Courthouse that inmates are walked through the same hallway that the public walks because it's such an old courthouse. There are a number of changes we've made. We can't do basic technology that everyone would find at their work because there's nowhere to run wires and cables. So I'm hoping that the King County Council will take a hard look at that. I suspect that they will. They already flagged the issue. So we'll see. I'd be happy to talk to you about that again.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us today.
Yes.
King County
Thank you.
Superior Court Judge Jim Rogers, we appreciate it.
Thank
and
you.
thank you for joining us, everyone. Join us again for another 15 minutes. We'll see you soon.